Welcome to Still Speak Podcast. Well, this is a sad evening update. For those who missed it, a body was found. As I was uploading my last video today, I got an alert that a body had been found in the area that they had been searching for Gabby Petito in Wyoming. A short time later, a press conference was held where it was said that the family had been made aware that the body matched the description of Gabby Petito. An autopsy needs to take place for full identification, but they're not going to tell her family that if they had any doubt, especially in a high-profile case like this. This is what usually is said before they positively confirm the body during an autopsy. And while it does happen that they wrongly identify a victim, it's a rare occurrence. I know I've seen it before, but I can't even give you a name off the top of my head. That's how rare it is, because I can usually, think of a story or a case or a name off the top of my head real quick to make an example. The agent who was speaking at the press conference was trying really hard to hold back tears. He did get a little choked up a few times. It was really hard to watch. It was very emotional. They did not answer any questions, obviously, because they just made the discovery less than 2 hours prior. A short time later, Joe Petito, Gabby's father, posted that Gabby touched the world. It's tragic. This young couple left to head on a trip that most of us only dream of doing. Her mother even said that they were all envious of what she was doing. She visited so many of the most gorgeous places in America, and it seems to be the only positive thing about her time spent right before her death. It should not have ended this way. It's beyond words tragic. And the story has really touched the world, as her father said. Let's talk about what happens next. Well, there'll be an autopsy performed, and they're going to try to find the cause of death. Cause of death usually comes out roughly within a few days. The final autopsy results will take a few weeks to a few months because they're going to be waiting for the toxicology. This is all protocol type things. As of right now, we don't know if a crime has been committed or a murder. I should say, we need to hear the cause of death first. There is a slight possibility it was not from homicide. I know what you're thinking. Trust me. And I agree with you. I think most of us know how she died. Until it's confirmed to be a murder, though, Brian Laundrie is still only a person of interest, if he's not dead by now or has not left the country. An issue that I am seeing arising is if it is a homicide, how they're going to be able to prove that it was at the hands of Brian. Yes, circumstantial is pointing that way, but I'm talking as far as DNA and what have you. I do wonder how they're going to handle it, since her body has now clearly been out in the elements for weeks. Sorry to get gruesome, but her body was definitely not how she was left 3 weeks or so ago. They really no longer need Brian to help find Gabby, but they of course still want to find him, hopefully alive, to be able to find out what happened and if he's involved in her death beyond abandoning her out there. Of course they want to find him too, because if he is connected to her death, meaning responsible for her death, they can get justice for Gabby. And him taking himself out cowardly is not the justice anybody wants to see, especially her parents, I'm sure. This story should be a lesson for criminals out there, that even in a case like this, that spanned many, many states and parks, they still found her after only 1 day of searching for her body officially in Grand Teton National Park in the Spread Creek dispersed camping area. And they did so with the help of the video that I discussed earlier in my video. They were able to focus in on the area that couple did see the van. And, that's the power of social media, getting her name and face out there, telling people and advising people to check their photos and videos, because you never know. You just never know what you're catching that you don't even know that you did. So that couple reviewed their footage. They contacted the FBI, and shortly after that is when they, focused in on that area, because the date of the video was August 27th, and the last contact with Gabby was by phone on the 25th. I know her mother said that she received a text on the 27th, and then again on the 30th, saying no service in Yosemite. Both texts Nicole does not believe was her daughter. I mean, we all know the people we communicate with on a daily basis, right? We can kind of tell how they talk, the way they spell, if they use emojis, their patterns. We just know how that person talks with us through text. So if the text was so short and that was unlike Gabby, or her mother just got that gut instinct, whatever the case may be, this mother did not believe that was her daughter. So if you mix these texts, the 27th and then the 30th, with this couple's footage of the van, thank God for video cameras, and Gabby's last contact, put that all together, it led to finding her body, or highly, highly, highly likely to be Gabrielle Petito. I'm feeling a really deep sadness for her family tonight, as I'm sure many of you are. I'm huge on separating emotion from a case to properly analyze the case without that emotional attachment. That does not mean that somebody is, not sensitive or sympathetic to the story. I absolutely have been sympathetic about her missing, okay? And it absolutely breaks my heart as a parent myself. I couldn't even imagine. But I'm also feeling a little frustrated. And I really don't want to turn my frustration into a blame game. But I think back to the body camera footage of their incident on August 12th. And I think, and I also said it in my other videos, that there were a lot of signs that there was way more going on with Gabby internally at that time that was coming out in her body language and specifically her words. And I think law enforcement should have picked up on that. I do believe they did their best given the circumstance, but I feel like maybe a little more could have been done to make sure that she was not blaming herself, because she had learned to blame herself. And I wonder if they even considered that, since that's a huge sign of abuse. If not, then that area's law enforcement, in my opinion, needs further training on domestic violence and domestic disputes. They did what they did, though, and it can't be changed, right? And I'm sure they're going it over in their heads over and over and over again since she's been missing, thinking about that day and their interaction with them and thinking, oh my God, did we get this right? And I'm sure they're beating themselves up. Sometimes we make mistakes, right? We all do. Cops are not an exception. I'm not trying to point the fingers. I'm not trying to make them feel worse, if they even hear this, which I highly doubt. But Gabby literally said she was worried that Brian was going to leave her, and that is why she jumped through the driver's side. That's how much she feared being left. And in the end, roughly roughly 15 to 18 days later, what do you know? She was left. She was left. We just don't know if she was left dead or alive. That's the part we don't know. And it's gut-wrenching to think that this young girl is on camera expressing that very concern. Could you imagine how that makes her parents feel? My goodness. What really happened on that day, August 12th? I don't believe it's what they told police happened. Because I got the sense that they were definitely downplaying the incident, because we all typically do that when we're stopped by police, whether it's, to downplay, like, oh, I really wasn't speeding, or I was speeding because blah, blah, blah. Like, we try to get out of it, I know the incident was 2 weeks prior, but clearly, in my opinion, allegedly, in my opinion, later, there was a dispute that went from 0 to 90, if you will. And it either resulted in her being left dead or her worst fear, and why she jumped through a van window. She was left alive, alone, with no food, no water, no transportation. We don't know. I also go back to talk about Brian going home to Florida in August. We still don't know why, and we don't have the exact days down. It's either 8/13 to 8/23 or 8/17 to 8/23. So either for 6 days or 10 days. Hopefully we'll eventually find out what that's all about. Because I'm wondering if this was his first attempt to leave her, and really it had nothing to do with storage at all. I'm thinking that it's possible this was his first attempt, and she just didn't tell her family that because she didn't want to worry them, and she was hoping he would come back, which we know he did. If that's the case, that means that they had an incident on 8/12, and then depending if he went to Florida on the 13th or the 17th, they had another issue shortly, so only a few days later, or a day later, and then they had another issue, a third one, after he came back from Florida. So it's possible, if that's what happened the first time, that, when he came back, the second time, his parents might have assumed that it happened again. And maybe he just told his parents, she told him to take the van. It does not explain why they'd want Gabby not to be found once they found out that she was missing, though, and that they knew he left her behind, right? But it's possible that he told them that story, like, oh, this time she told me to take the van. I mean, I wouldn't have believed that as a parent, or at least I don't think I would have. I can't really say if I would or I wouldn't, because we want to believe our children. We don't want to believe the worst, or consider the worst, right? I think a lot of people, including her parents, have been assuming that the Laundrie family knows where Gabby was or what happened to her, but I'm willing to guess that they were not told what actually happened. Not the truth, anyways. They definitely heard a story. I'm just not believing that he told them what the actual truth was. Shortly after the press conference, the Petito and Schmidt family lawyer put out a statement. Quote, I am making a personal request to members of the press and news media to refrain from contacting the Schmidt and Petito family. Due to today's developments, we are asking the press and news media to have some decorum and sensitivity for Gabby's family and allow them to grieve. I will be in contact with you when Gabby's family is ready to make a public statement. I would also like to personally thank the FBI, the Suffolk County Police Department, the Northport Police Department, and especially the Grant Teton Search and Rescue Team. Your tireless work and determination helped bring Gabby home to her parents. The family and I will be forever grateful, unquote. Northport Police then put out a tweet and post on Facebook that read, quote, saddened and heartbroken to learn that Gabby has been found deceased. Our focus from the start, along with the FBI and national partners, has been to bring her home. We will continue to work with the FBI in the search for more answers, unquote. They're getting a lot of heat, by the way. They sure are. Gabby was most likely deceased long before she was even reported missing, so I can't fault them or her parents for reporting her missing, on the 11th. I really think they were just, thinking she was out there in nowhere land with no service. And even if they had realized earlier than the 11th, like let's say the 4th, it's likely she was already deceased then too. Okay, so it really wouldn't have made that much of a difference. It's really sad because I know in their minds they're probably, beating themselves up for not realizing sooner that something was wrong. But that's what happens, right? We always start blaming ourselves in these situations, in these types of situations, because not all of us have been in this particular situation, and hopefully none of us ever are, because it's awful. While I do know they were not trailing Brian as thoroughly as they do with actual suspects, I did expect that they'd be keeping tabs on him to see if he would attempt to go back to the scene of a crime or to wherever she was, or that he would flee, considering he was the last one with her and knew where she was and what happened to her before he arrived back in Florida. He, and he alone, knew. There is no disputing that. He knew. He was with her and the van. He had the van. He didn't have her. So he knows where she was and what happened. And I think this circumstance should have changed the police's typical protocol. You can respect a citizen's right to the Fifth Amendment, but also, keep at minimum, or at least attempt to keep tabs on the last person with the victim that you're trying to find. The last person. There is no possibly she was seen by somebody else. No, him and him alone. Only him. She was only last seen with him. Now, I don't know if any balls are dropped here. If there were, I'm sure we'll see that come out. Possibly even lawsuits down the line. I don't know. Based on what I'm seeing from law enforcement experts, they didn't agree with how Northport was handling this. At minimum, I think a law should eventually be in the works in the future for stories similar to this, when it is very clear and obvious someone is involved and at minimum knows where the person is and is refusing to cooperate. They should be allowed to keep tabs on them. Okay? Because look, Brian fled. That's the reality. He's not missing. He fled. He ran. He ran like Forrest. Okay? Their goal was to find Gabby, and Gabby has been found by officials and agencies out in the Wyoming area, and the next part would be to bring Brian in, except now they can't find his ass. So there's that. The $1 million question right now is, what's Brian's family thinking now that Gabby's body's been found and they know she's deceased? Will they go in to speak with police and tell them the story that Brian told them, even if it was a lie? Have they now grown a conscience about a girl who once lived in their home? And a girl that Roberta, Brian's mother, knitted Christmas presents for? Who was going to be her future daughter-in-law? I don't know. We'll soon find out. The laundry's lawyer released a statement upon the discovery of Gabby's body. It's very short, saying, quote, The news about Gabby Petito is heartbreaking. The Laundrie family prays for Gabby and her family, unquote. Well, at least they called her by name in this one, because in the last two they called her Miss Petito. How nice of them to actually use her name. Goodness. We now know the person that people believe they saw digging in the footage of the van on the side of a back dirt road was not what they thought, because they thought that this person was digging before the van or on the back side of the van to the left, and the location of her body was near the van that we saw in that video, but it was in the front of the van out to the right in that area. So she was close to where the van was seen on that road. Also, the hitchhiking claim that I mentioned in last video, that one woman was claiming she picked Brian up, blah blah blah. I kind of figured this, but now it really doesn't add up, okay? Because the van was seen near where her body was now found, so the crime scene, on the 27th, and that would mean that he stayed in the area for 2 full days before trying to hitchhike, then returned to the abandoned van somewhere after already leaving it. So it doesn't really add up. It doesn't really add up that he committed a crime, if he committed a crime, and, hit her body or left her body, that he would stay in the area for 2 full days before considering leaving via the van or hitchhiking. And if she was already deceased and he already had her body out there, if he's involved in this, why wouldn't he just take the van and not hitchhike? That doesn't make any sense. So I don't think that story was true. I didn't think it was true before, and now I further don't think that it's true. Hey, the lady might have been telling the truth about picking somebody up, but it just might not have been Brian, right? Doesn't necessarily mean she was flat out lying. I think we can also safely assume now that the text her mom received on the 27th and the 30th, or at minimum the 30th, was not Gabby, in my opinion. But time will tell. If this van was on the side of the road on the 27th, I think it's more than reasonable to come to the conclusion that it was not her. And that's it for tonight. Everything has gone kind of radio silent. It's mostly posts about her body being discovered and people giving their condolences and expressing their sadness and frustration and anger on how all of this is unfolded. I do expect that a ton will unfold tomorrow, and it's likely that they might kind of put a fire under the coroner's butt to be like, give us a cause of death stat while we're still looking for Brian, because if we find him and he's alive, we need that, cause of death to take the next step. So keep the Petito and Schmidt families in your thoughts and prayers tonight, including all their extended family and friends and everybody who worked and loved Gabby Petito. Until next time, I'll see you soon. On a side note, real quick before I go, though, I really wish this had a different ending. It wasn't likely, and I kind of knew, right? But it really didn't have to happen. She's such a young girl. She's had her whole life. Not married yet. Ambitious. Excited. Had a vision. A goal. Right? She hasn't had children yet and experienced what it's like to become a mom. She has younger brothers and sisters who will now be affected by this. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So again, I end by saying, keep the family in your prayers tonight. Hug your loved ones. I know we should always do that, but right? But sometimes these stories are a reminder to all of us that we can lose the people we love very quickly. Until next time, I'll see you soon.